bringing you the best music from home studios across the world. This is TAETRO Radio.
What is going on, everybody? This is TAETRO, back with an all-new episode of TAETRO Radio. Now, I know it's been a while, and that's definitely my fault. Some of you know that I teach music to kids in Boston, and the summer is our busiest season of the year, so I spent all summer doing that. There wasn't a lot of time for videos, let alone the podcast, so I'm pumped to be back in it. This is the TAETRO Radio podcast. It's a podcast where we showcase music from home studio producers across the world. I like to give people a platform for their music to be heard because there isn't a lot of support for the home studio community. So we're gonna jump in with a track right after a couple quick announcements. I might even add some Q&A to today's episode, but a couple quick announcements. Since the channel has been growing so fast, like I'm so stoked that the growth has continued this year, I've been getting a lot of pitches for sponsorships and for products to be in videos, and what that basically means is there's a ton of new content coming to the channel, so make sure you keep your eyes peeled, even turn on alerts for subscriptions, and make sure that you're watching, because I don't know if you've seen the Native Instruments Machina Micro Mark III content, but I'm hoping to be making more with that, and of course a couple other Native Instrument products that are coming my way. Also, just brand new products that I had never heard of till the company reached out, but I'm super stoked to be featuring them on the channel. And one other quick announcement for November. So in less than 2 months, I'm going to be heading out to the Ableton Loop conference in Los Angeles. Super stoked because Ableton Loop is Ableton's conference that happens every year, but it usually happens in Berlin because they're a German company. This year they're bringing it to Los Angeles, which is super accessible for me. I was able to get the trip funded through a professional development grant, which is I'm super stoked about that. And I'm maybe thinking about hosting some type of meetup if people are going to be in the Los Angeles area, because I think that would be cool. I don't spend much time over there, but I know a lot of people are from there. So if you're listening to the podcast or you're a fan of the channel and you want to come hang out in LA in November, I think it's around the 8th through the 12th, let me know in a comment, shoot me a DM, and I'll put something together. But without further ado, our first track is going to be by a home studio producer named Bruce from Belgium. He's 20. The note on this track is I would like to make a track that's dreamy music but still has enough energy to be danceable. So I'll let you all be the judge. Let's listen to Bruce's track Melon. Check it out. That was Melon by Bruce, a 20-year-old home studio producer from Belgium. I really loved the sound of this track. The sonic world that you've created with this track is just so dope. One of my favorite things about electronic music is when people blend the electronic with the organic. So you've got that 4-to-the-floor house bass, and you've got some pads happening, that electronic bass, but then you've also got the vocal samples, the strummed instruments, the strummed string type instruments playing throughout, and that's so cool. And that crispy mallet percussion sound that's sort of featured through the whole track, it's just really beautiful sounding. And I would say if your goal is to make both dreamy and danceable music, I think you nailed it on the head. I think a lot of people can go one way or the other. Dreamy music, you know, super ambient, slow, long tones and stretched out, or super dancey like house music, kind of boring in a lot of ways. In this, you've definitely blended the two elements. It is super dreamy, but then it's also at a decent tempo to dance to. Very, very cool. I love the way you play with the different elements in the track. They sort of come in and out to form different sections. Sometimes the vocal sample becomes more prominent, especially when the drums drop out. When the drums kick back in, you know, I start hearing the bass line more, and that's really awesome as well. I would play with the arrangement of this track a little bit, because about 3/4 of the way through, I really want to hear it get taken to the next level. I know you're going for a dreamy vibe, and sometimes that can mean you want people in a trance state, so it does kind of keep the same stuff going. But I think that there's a way to do that and also just ramp up the energy, especially towards the end. You do very well with like building tension and release with the different drops. I think the beat dropping out throughout the track, it happens often, but I think it's effective because it means that we're not kind of bored by the 4-to-the-floor bass after a while. Especially about a little over halfway through the track, I think it's about the 2-minute mark when the drums drop out and then the string instrument really becomes prominent. That's a really cool part of the track. And then when it comes back in, I just want energy. I want to get to the next level, you know? So you've got the kick, you've got the snare, but maybe adds a 16th note hi-hat pattern just to really drive us forward. And one thing I sort of learned from Deadmau5, I would watch his live streams a lot, and he would talk about adding the bells and whistles as his last step. And what he meant by that was like adding the dramatic risers, the noises, the washy sounds that fall on the beat drop. I think this track could benefit a lot from that. Just some like white noise with tons of reverb building up to those drops, and then just a fall, like a waterfall when the beat officially drops. I think that really helps the listener feel satisfied once that beat drops. And I think when you're playing around the 250-ish mark, when that beat drops back in, I definitely want to hear something like boom, like we made it to the end and we're gonna jam out on this for the last minute and a half, and it's gonna feel good. It's definitely a feel good track. I think you could add a little bit more drama, add those bells and whistles, maybe a 16th note hi-hat pattern if it doesn't compete with the bells too much, to add a little more drama and a little more structure to the arrangement of this piece. But overall, I love the worlds you've created with this piece. It's really dope. Thank you, Bruce from Belgium. This is a great track. Alright, one thing I want to start doing on this podcast is doing more Q&A, because it's one thing to do a Q&A video, which ends up being kind of boring. You don't really have to see me for me to do Q&A. And I get tons of DMs, Instagram, Facebook, email, a lot of people asking the same questions, so I want to answer them on air so that everybody can take value from them, and maybe I'll get less of the same question. So if you do want to have your question answered on the podcast, send an email to taetro.music@gmail.com and subject line podcast question, so I know that is a question for the podcast. Facebook gets really messy. I prefer not to answer messages from Facebook, so email is the best way. taetro.music@gmail.com. Our first question on the show today comes from Patrick. Patrick says, "Hey Tatro, I just discovered your YouTube channel and I can't stop watching your videos." Thank you, Patrick. "I don't have much equipment yet, but was wondering if you could give me some recommendations. I want to be able to make reggae and electronica." He says, "I have a Focusrite Sapphire and an Audio-Technica AT202, so that's a microphone." He also asked if I would do a reggae-inspired live video. I don't really know enough about reggae music to do a live video, but there's a lot of artists out there that I think do that check out FKJ. He does a lot of really cool vibey stuff, more like dub, but has some reggae influence, I think. In terms of equipment, so you've got a mic and you've got an interface. So before you think about getting something else, let's think about what you can do with what you already have. Hopefully you have a DAW, and hopefully that DAW is Ableton, because I really think Ableton is one of the best tools, especially for live performance and for production. But you've got the interface, you've got the mic, so you can already do tons of recording audio. You can do tons of sampling. You can record in with instruments. You might need a couple live instruments. I mean, bass is super prominent in reggae music, so you might want to learn some electric bass, get one of those to plug into your interface and record some. But don't underestimate the power of your microphone. You can record little sounds, tapping your desk, tapping pencils together, silverware, anything you have around the house that can sort of substitute percussion. Sample as much as you can and make something out of that. Now, you can go so far with that. You can find loops online. You can record as much as you can. You still might want to add a little flavor to it that you can't do with sampling. So your next step would probably be getting a MIDI keyboard. I usually recommend one of the mini versions to people because those are the most affordable and you can do a lot with them for beginners. If you're using Ableton Live, my suggestion is always the Launch Key Mini, or any of the Launch Key line are appropriate because the bigger the better, right? So if you get the 61, you have access to pretty much a full keyboard. 49 is a little more, it's better to fit on a desk, and then the mini is easy to, you know, throw in a bag and go. If the keys are too small for you on the mini, you can also just get the 25, which is still 25 keys, but they're full-size keys, not mini keys. If you're not working with Ableton Live, I would probably recommend the Akai MPK Mini Mark II. It's got a sustain input, which the Launch Key Mini does not have, so that's definitely your best bet. It's got big pads. The only thing you don't get is the Ableton Live control, so that's why I don't recommend that one first for Ableton Live users. But yeah, get sampling and then think about adding in maybe a couple live instruments to your rig, like an electric bass or a guitar, and think about also getting a MIDI keyboard. I think that is the way to go for you. Alright, we are going to start things off with another track. This one's going to be a little bit shorter than usual. It's a short ambient jam by an artist named Grunkan. Grunkan is 31 and from Sweden. So enjoy this short little track, Ambient Jam. Check it out.
This is TAETRO Radio.
Alright, that was a short ambient jam by producer Grunkan from Sweden. It's a short track, and Grunkan writes in with this track, got stuck with it, and I wonder how you see the arranging when it comes to more ambient and chill tracks. Do you still use more pop song style with verse chorus or something else? I often end up with a long song without clear sections. Yeah, I think a lot of producers run into these problems, but let me just talk about the advantages you have with your track already. You have a great set of sounds, very minimal, I can tell. You have a clear lead, you have a clear bass line, you have a clear pad, so you've kind of set up your sonic world. But the arrangement is sort of what's going to take your track to the next level and have something that people want to go back and listen to. So you have elements here that basically make up what I would say is an intro and an A section. And then towards the end, the bells actually do something a little different. They start rising, and it's a really strange ending because I'm expecting more, which I think that is your plan. I think you plan to go on with this track, and I definitely think you should. if you view all the elements of the track that you've already composed as your A section, you have the soft bell tones that sort of follow an even pattern, a kind of slower rate, something like that. Now your goal should be to make a B section, and the best way to think about a B section is have it be a contrasting section, something that's totally different than what you've done already before, but with the same sounds if you can, or you can enter in with a new sound. There's a couple ways to do this, so you don't have to change the tempo, you don't have to change the key. So if you keep those elements constant, you can start adding another layer of sound or a counter melody, something that counters that bell melody. And I know what you mean about ambient and chill tracks just getting too long, and the answer to your question about structure and arrangement is I fall back on pop style arranging all the time. And I don't really see it as falling back, I see it as that's just what works and that's what people want to hear, or more specifically, that's what I want to hear as a listener. And I definitely create music that I want to listen to, and I'm a big pop music fan. Like, I love pop music. I listen to pop music more than I listen to electronic music. So bringing that pop arrangement style to electronic music is something I love, because a lot of the most successful electronic music artists have done that, and that's why you see a lot of crossover with radio hits and EDM producers. They start off making these like epic EDM tracks, and it translates so well to pop music that all you really have to do is add a bright female vocal usually on top of it, and you have a pop banger. So take those elements and apply them to your ambient jam. Verse, chorus, pre-chorus, bridge, and then a chorus. Like, that's basically every song, and it's okay to repeat in some ways. You build these stationary sections, so your verse, you might have one verse followed by a chorus followed by another verse. You can take most of the elements from verse 1 and copy and paste them to verse 2. Just make some minor changes in sound design, some minor changes in the patterns, and you have repetition, but it's not strictly copy and pasted. I think a lot of people avoid that because they don't want it to be boring. But if you make subtle adjustments, people will sort of start to notice those, and that makes the different sections special and different, but also familiar. So that's my advice to you. I think this track could be taken to the next level, and if you add a B section, or if you kind of build up the arrangement of this track, please send in the revised version, because I would love for the listeners to hear it both ways. But thank you so much, Grunkan from Sweden. Thank you for that ambient jam. Let's pick up another question for Q&A. So the next question comes from Luca. Luca says, "Hey Tatro, how's it going?" "It's going great. Could you help me with something?" "I'm gonna try. I just watched your video from earlier this year about the Soundbrenner metronome, and it showed me that the watch can do exactly what I need for live performances. Eliminates the need for a rhythmic loop in the beginning of a song when started in Ableton Live, which is also what you said you were using it for." Yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know, I did a video earlier this year on the Soundbrenner Pulse. It's basically this watch that lights up and vibrates and becomes your metronome that you feel instead of hear, and you can link it up with Ableton using Ableton Link. I think that this is a really cool advantage for players because you don't have to hear a metronome and you don't have to play any loop. So say I wanted to start a song by playing guitar, but I need it to be in time with my project. I could do that with the Soundbrenner loop because I'm feeling something, you're not hearing a metronome, and I don't need to push my arrangement into having drums come in first, because that's kind of a creative roadblock right there if you have to have percussion first so you can be in time. So Luca says, "I haven't purchased the watch yet because I was wondering if they can be linked without Wi-Fi. I saw something about using an ad hoc or virtual routers. So I guess my question is, how do you get your Ableton Live and your Soundbrenner to link up without Wi-Fi? Do you still use it in your performances? Thank you so much." So a lot of you know from the channel that I don't like doing live performances that much, even though I do them in video. So I create my live performances from the comfort of my home usually, or outdoors, that sort of thing. You don't really see me in a club that often or ever. So I don't use the Soundburner Pulse a ton, but I have used it since making the video. And I get what you're saying, and this is sort of a hang up for me for a lot of other Ableton Link situations, because Ableton Link, if you don't know, uses Wi-Fi. So a lot of apps have Ableton Link compatibility. You can sync the metronome and the time to an app, and that's what you do with the Soundburner Pulse. But you do this over Wi-Fi. So I'm at home, I connect to my home Wi-Fi with my phone, I connect to my home Wi-Fi with my MacBook Pro, and then they're both connected, so Ableton Link, they can see each other, and we connect that way. This becomes kind of a problem for performances because you don't know that where you're going has Wi-Fi. You don't know that where you're going has Wi-Fi that you're going to be able to connect to. So how do you rely on this for a live performance? And I haven't run into this yet, but there are ways that you can create networks within your computer. So basically, if your laptop or computer can connect to a network, it has Wi-Fi capabilities, it can also host its own network. So that's something you have to look into. I don't know exactly how to do it, but your laptop should be able to host its own network that they are both connected to, obviously, because your laptop is your laptop, and then you would connect to it with your phone via Wi-Fi like normal, but instead of connecting to the internet, you're really just connecting to a local network that your laptop is broadcasting from. But this does bring up a good point about a lot of things relying on Wi-Fi for connectivity, and it's not that it's not reliable, but it's not a sure thing. So I think that makes a lot of people scared, especially in places where Wi-Fi is bad or not accessible. I think companies got to find a better way. And I know Bluetooth isn't perfect, but maybe with some improvements to Bluetooth, we'll see something happen where we don't need to go over Wi-Fi anymore. But yeah, try to set up a local network on your computer. That is my suggestion. We have one more track on today's episode, and that track is by DJ Caustic, longtime community member. DJ Caustic is 18 from the USA, and he says, I created this song for one of my best friends. Life around us as we know it is changing, and I'm thinking it's for the best. So this song is called Everything Changes. Check it out.
You're listening to TAETRO Radio.
Alright, that was Everything Changes by DJ Caustic. It's interesting because this is not usually the type of track we have on the podcast, and I'm interesting that this is coming from DJ Caustic too. I mean, especially when you have DJ in your name, you're expecting something totally different, I would think. So I'm thinking about, what is your artistic identity at the moment? Is this a different project almost than the stuff you usually work on? I don't know. But overall, it's a beautiful track. It sounds like an indie movie. Like, it sounds like it should be on an indie movie soundtrack, like Into the Wild, something like that. I love the guitar. The guitar is very reminiscent of early Bon Iver. I love that. It doesn't sound like you're using a pick. It sounds just soft and mellow. And then also the piano melodies are great. I think that's what makes me get a cinematic vibe from it. Just the like kind of epic nature of that piano happening. And the drums, the drum production is great. Like the drums sound clean, the drums sound crisp, they are super bright. I'm wondering if they are actual mic'd drums or if they're drums from a sound library. Either way, I think they sound great. If they're from a library, they sound natural, and I couldn't really tell. If they're mic'd and recorded on your own, great audio engineering on that front. Let's get in and talk about maybe some arrangement things. So the vocals, I like the vocals, I like the layers. What I'm noticing is that most of the time the vocals are sort of buried in the background. And usually when we hear, you know, songs with vocals and with lyrics, the vocals are kind of what we want up front, because you don't want to be, well, I think what we're listening for when we hear lyrics and when we hear vocalists, we really want to hear what the person is saying. And if your listener is straining to hear what the person is saying, that's going to kind of make it less of a fun experience to listen to, because yes, everything else that's happening around in the song is beautiful, but if I can't hear what that singer is saying, I'm not going to be super into it. I'm going to be straining. That's going to distract me. So I would just bring the vocal level up a bit, even if the vocals are not supposed to be the focal point of the track. Bring them up a bit because people are going to want to hear it. And the layers are great anyway, so I don't think we should shy away from having the vocals super low. And I love that there are vocals on this track. We don't usually have a lot of tracks with vocals on here. Also, arrangement wise, there's a lot of sections of this song. The song is over 7 minutes long. I would, and there's a lot of cool stuff that happens towards the end, especially with the guitar and bass syncing up at the very end, and also with the drum fills and stuttering effects. You sort of brought more of an electronic performance elements to this very acoustic song, but that doesn't happen until much later. And I think long form music is really hard for people to get into. I talk about this on the podcast a lot, but if your track is long, it needs to be justified that it's that long. And what would have enticed me as a listener to keep listening is if you bring some of those electronic performance elements in earlier, because the section that happens around 4:45, 4:50, that really takes off right there and adds something new beyond just being sort of an acoustic indie track. Whereas you have cool drops that happen, say 2 minutes in, that happen at 3 minutes and 3:30-ish. But if you brought some of those elements into those sections, I'd be like, okay, where is this going? And sort of gradually introduce the listener to something new, so that by the end, all the new things are coming together and they're forming one big epic ending. Overall, beautiful track. I can definitely see this on the next big indie film score. So you should be submitting this places. Find a director, like a young director who's making indie movies, who like wants music for their production, music for their trailers, and just offer it for free. Like, even a little bit of publicity will go a long way for you, for sure. But great work, DJ Caustic. Thank you so much for the submission. We are going to take one more question, Q&A. So make sure if you have questions for the podcast, you email them to taetro.music@gmail.com. But our final question, it's actually a two-part question, but I'll allow it. It comes from Metal Wolf. Metal Wolf asks, "Hi, is is Launchpad Mark II and Launchkey Mini Mark II enough for creating beats for fun? That was the first part of their question. Second part, and how do I get so many followers? So let's take it one step at a time. Launchpad Mark II and Launchkey Mini Mark II is absolutely plenty for making beats. Not even just for fun. That's enough for making beats professionally. I mean, you could get away with just the Launchkey or just the Launchpad. You can do everything with both of those. Well, I won't say everything because then somebody's going to comment. But you can do most things with one of those controllers. But together they form like a production powerhouse. You can control Ableton Live with your Launchpad. That's all your workflow. And all your musical ideas can come out through the Launchkey. So yes, I think that's plenty for creating beats. And then the second half of the question, how do you get so many followers? And that's a question that I get a lot across social media. And one thing that I made a deliberate decision to do when I started the channel, well, actually no, at first I made the channel and I was just putting up live performances. A lot of people saw the Rain live performance because Novation shared it. And that was really cool. But what I noticed is my subscriber count was hovering around 600 subscribers, even though that video was getting a lot of views. So what I decided was to think about, okay, what do I as a home studio musician want? Like, what do I want to see? And what I found was the most frustrating thing was you would see an epic live performance on YouTube. And this could be from a brand, this could be from Ableton, from Novation, or it could be from another music creator. And there would be no tutorial on how to do it. So everybody in the comments is just arguing about how it was done, and then me in my head, I'm reverse engineering everything to try to figure out how to take those elements and use them for myself. So what I decided to do was become a resource for the community. So I put out a couple Launchkey tutorials to start, I believe, and just talked about how I was using it for my workflow, and I used iMovie and my Galaxy Note 4 to shoot it with. And that was my first tutorial. And after I started doing consistent tutorials, people started subscribing. There was a reason for people to follow, and there's a reason for people to subscribe. If people don't have a reason, if you make just cool music, okay, that's cool. But a lot of people make cool music on the internet. It has to be more than that. Why would people subscribe to me? Because they know I'm going to provide some value, and I provide value in the entertainment with my live performances and music, and then I provide value, like educational value, by teaching people how to do what I do. So that's my tip. Be consistent and provide value. It's been a good episode. I'm glad to be back on the TAETRO Radio podcast, and I'm stoked that I already have tracks for episode 2, so stay tuned next week. But if you want to submit a track for TAETRO Radio, you need to become a part of the TAETRO Facebook community. The way you do that is by messaging me, TAETRO, on Facebook and saying, send me an invite to the community. Then I'll send you a link, you get approved, and you're in. Once you're in there, I usually post when I'm accepting submissions, so I'll probably be making a post like that very soon so that I can get submissions for episodes 3 and 4 of this season. But that is how you get in, become a member of the TAETRO Facebook community. If you don't already, make sure you subscribe to youtube.com/TAETRO. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, all that. Links will be in the description. And the most important part of this is to make sure that you go follow all the home studio musicians that you heard on today's show. All of their links will be in the description down below, so you can go show them your support and maybe even leave a comment on their pages and let them know you heard their track on TAETRO Radio. Thank you so much for community member Jerry for being our voice of God. And thank you to DJ Caustic, Bruce, and Grunkan for submitting music in this episode. Make sure you go subscribe to the channel, youtube.com/TAETRO. This has been TAETRO with another episode of TAETRO Radio. Have a good one.